Okay, Duke, can you still hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
We're going to do our 1 minute countdown and we'll be right back. Everybody, when you see the notification, go tag a friend, grab some popcorn. We'll be back in 1 minute. All right, you back with me, Duke?
I am here. Can you hear me fine?
I can hear you pretty good this evening. I notice you still have your Bugmobile behind you.
Yeah, the Bugmobile, it's a work in progress, baby.
Absolutely. Okay, so what have we got on tap for tonight? What's the ideas? What are we going to discuss?
Man, we've got a show that is something that everybody needs. It's something that's on everybody's mind. If you're not talking about it, you probably voted during the presidential election, and in one of the states that we'll probably talk about.
Absolutely. And look, as a reminder, normally we talk about, relatively local Bossier stuff, but of course the presidential election absolutely relates to Bossier. And Duke, I don't know if you're aware or if everyone else is, but in the presidential election we had, what was it, 22,000 people vote or something in the early voting. In the most recent election we had like 475. So I'm going to say a lot of people were interested, of course, in the presidential election.
Yeah, I mean, I think the gravity of it, folks realized that it was going to be probably one of the most consequential elections in the history of the country. That's hard to believe, but I think it was the truth. So we're going to cover a little bit of our last show real quick, rehash, and jump through it.
Yeah, let's just do it kind of quick because I believe we do have a guest waiting in the official green room for Bossier Watch. That just sounds so professional. So yeah, let's kind of just skim through a very, very quick review.
In a little bit of the review, we briefly discussed about something that happened today in which you weren't there to be able to talk about it.
No, I was not. So let me see if I can switch.
Whoops,
not that.
Well, wait a minute. You were there, but you weren't there.
Well, yeah, I was there, but then kind of not there. And so let me see if I can pull this screenshot up here. So what we're talking about is today was the Attorney General or state of Louisiana through the Attorney General's office versus Robert Berry. This is the second lawsuit on the dual office holding. And yeah, I got up to the courthouse just to go sit in as an observer and kind of watch the proceedings and all that. And it's kind of interesting. Ron Machota is Robert Berry's attorney, and he pulled a little lawyer, I won't really call it a trick, but it was kind of a little sleight of hand, and sequestered me, Heath Harvey, Walt Bigby, and Gary Weish, had us sequestered and actually had us sworn in as potential witnesses, which promptly got us removed from the courtroom. So I was there, but I was out in the hallway.
Well, makes me think you're an ant or something.
There's no telling, but hey, that's why Machota gets paid the big bucks. He comes up with those little quick tricks like that, and whatever, it is what it is. So to give everybody a quick just update, yeah, we already expected this, but Judge Charles Smith did dismiss or throw out the case because of the DA's office case against Robert Berry, and that's a whole other, of course, long conversation we probably don't want to get to in this show. So as of right now, the ball is back in the Attorney General's court to see what legal maneuvers they may want to try to do in the future, or they may not. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, and so in the last show, we posed a question as well on a subject. We posed what the churches, why do churches need to be involved in politics, and why are they trying to control politics locally? It's a question that still stands. We've gotten some feedback on that, in which that'll be another show down the road, and but the question still stands.
Absolutely.
What does people out there think?
Yeah, we're just posing the question. Let's hear some answers. Comment, send us an email to bossierwatch@gmail.com, or if you want to be a little more private or totally private, make a Proton Mail account, send an email to bossierwatch@protonmail. Let us know what you think. You don't have to put your name to it.
So, you want to jump right off into this show tonight?
I say we jump right off into the show tonight. So let me see if I can get our guest on board. Let me see if I can go ahead and get his volume up. So we've got volume, and let's see if we have a guest. Haha, look, we have video and audio.
Royal Alexander, how are you this afternoon, brother?
Doing great. Good to be with you guys.
Awesome. Good to have you on the show. Yeah.
Rex, I met this guy, I don't even know how many years ago. I actually thought about it a little bit today. I think it may have been 15 to 20 years ago.
Wow.
He was doing constitutional classes to lay folks over in Shreveport, and it was the most amazing thing. Folks would come who didn't know a thing about government or what have you, and he was giving these classes, and I would argue that he by himself brought up a lot of folks to get involved and educated them on what our government stands for, what it's supposed to stand for, and educated them on what they needed to know. And I've always had a respect for you, Royal, for that. I think that's one of the better things that I've seen folks do,
Absolutely. And Royal, just so you know, I hadn't really commented much on any of your posts, but I do sit there and read your posts. They are very, very outstanding and generally right on point. So good job.
Thank you. Thank you both so much, guys.
All right, so let's dive right off into it. Where do we want to start?
So, yeah, well, kind of what got us wanting to do this show, Royal, was, we've had a lot of stuff going on. Obviously, if you're pay attention to politics at all, you know there's some really historical things, I would say, happening. And you being in politics and Rex and I as well being in politics, I mean, we're getting questions daily, and folks are pounding us with questions. There's a lot of folks that feel hopeless out there. There's a lot of folks that, there's a lot of talk. And one person recently sent me a message, a private message, and I shared it on my page, and it started a pretty contentious dialogue. And Rex, you want to share that up there?
Yeah, let me keep getting that audio in there. Yeah, give me about 2 seconds here, and let me pull that one up. Let's see, that would be right there. Let me get rid of this one. Okay, and so we kind of cut Royal off for just a second, but we'll bring him back. Royal, your audio's still there, so if you want to chime in. Duke, go ahead.
Yeah,
sure.
And this fellow was a friend of mine, and he's kind of out there, and he's just basically, he just said, here it is, Duke. I said after the presidential election was stolen, I'm done voting, and I mean it. He was just really expressing his disgust. He blamed the Republican Party. Just went down the list, and I can't say that I completely agree with him on that sentiment, and I hear that from so many folks. I mean, daily, I bet I get 5 to 10 people that call or text, and they're just disgusted with the whole process. And Rex and I were talking about it, and we were like, who best to get to talk about the subject, where we stand, and what we're looking at. And Royal, from there, jump off in there and tell us what you think we're looking at with the Supreme Court and the Texas filing as recently. And what do you, how do you see things?
Well, I understand that man's frustration, but I will say that I'm never hopeless. I'm never hopeless because I have a strong faith in God, and I believe deeply in our Constitution. Where we are now, in my view, is the Texas lawsuit that was filed is now at 21 other states join it. And from that standpoint, I mean support it. It will be up to the Supreme Court to allow what they call leave of court to formally join the lawsuit. But it's certainly attention getting that 21 states have joined Texas. It's no wonder their heads are spinning. My head has been spinning just trying to keep up with all the information. But I can say that these other suits, they've been so misreported. Just a quick example. That Pennsylvania lawsuit, only the injunction enjoining the state of Pennsylvania from certifying electors, only the relief called an injunction was what was denied by the court yesterday. It's all a blur. Or that was the day before. I think it was yesterday. But
was that the Boca bar?
Yes, boot bar, exactly. But there's several boot bar cases because it's not the Secretary of Elections, but she plays that role in Pennsylvania, so she's sued regularly. But what I mean is the certiorari, the writ of certiorari has not been denied, just the injunction. That has been denied. They're not going to freeze those electors. So people are misled totally about what's going on. Now, let's focus on Texas for a minute. If you love the Constitution and constitutional law as I do, it's fascinating. Things are different when one state sues other states. That gives the Supreme Court both original and exclusive jurisdiction, meaning although it's still the Supreme Court is acting like a trial court. If it decides to take up that case, the Texas case, it will be acting as though it's a trial court, a court of first impression, even though it's the United States Supreme Court. That's what original jurisdiction means. That's a good thing because the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction right there in the Constitution. It doesn't have to work its way up. It doesn't have to start at a federal district court or a state district court, go to an appellate court, and then try to go to the U.S. Supreme Court. It can go there immediately. So I think it was brilliant of Texas to file it the way it did. That's my first point. My second point is it may actually be a cleaner case for the U.S. Supreme Court to grab. And by that, I mean Pennsylvania was raising issues largely just in Pennsylvania. But this Texas lawsuit, it's suing several of the other states, Wisconsin, Georgia, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. If the Supreme Court wanted a vehicle to reach everything here, the Texas lawsuit gives it that to do it. What do I mean by that? There's two major arguments being made here. One, fraud, and the second, a violation of very clear constitutional law. Before I address those two, let me just say, people say, oh, the Supreme Court's not going to get involved in that. I disagree. In 2000, the Supreme Court got involved when one state, Florida, and a few counties, mostly Miami-Dade and Broward counties, were in a battle, were an issue, and they were counting votes differently. and the U.S. Supreme Court got involved. Why? Because a presidential election was on the line. Here, 6 states, one is suing 5. 6 American states are involved, with now 21 joining. That is much larger. And my gut tells me a couple of things. One, if the Supreme Court wanted to walk away, guys, they could do it so easily. They could say, writ denied, this is a political question. It's not justiciable, meaning we're not going to adjudicate it. It's up to the states and their constitution to work it out, meaning states, if you don't want to certify your electors, you don't have to, but it's not our headache. But they haven't done that. And we're now, how many days since November 3rd?
So if
Each day that this goes on, let me just, go ahead, dude.
let me ask you a question. So if the Supreme Court was inclined to walk away from this, like you just said, they probably would have already done that by now, would you say?
Yes.
So
Good deal. Sorry to interrupt you, but I thought that was key.
Yeah, and somebody named Terry Norris just popped up a question, and I see it too, Rick. Will they force it to go to the House on January 6th? That is what's so interesting to me. You know, they don't want to be thought of as being political, but they are 1/3 of the federal government. We have 3 branches, remember, legislative, executive, and judicial. Well, they're the judicial branch. And so I don't think there's at least 5 of them that can allow a presidential election to be stolen. I mean, sometimes they've got to get involved, and I think, as I said, they got involved in Florida 20 years ago with one state. And here, that was just confusion of counting and recounting, and this is widespread. I mean, again, half the country is now involved in this directly or indirectly, the state. So the question is, I could see the Supreme Court saying, because it's so muddled, because your state elections offices and officers have so mangled what was supposed to happen, this court can no longer, in a legal principled way, decide which ballots are valid and which are not. It's too muddled. We can't figure it out. So what we're going to do is not allow electors to be counted from Pennsylvania, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan. And so if they do, then that means Joe Biden has no longer got to neither candidate. And so it goes into the House of Representatives. Then the Supreme Court can say, we didn't pick the president. You handed us a corrupt checkerboard to work with. We didn't pick the president. We merely said corruption's not going to pick him either. So we're going to send him into the People's House. The U.S. House of Representatives is called the People's House, and let them decide. Each state gets one vote. It's not majority Democrat when it comes to what they call the contingent election. If it goes into the House of Representatives, that's called the contingent election. And I think that that's probably the most principled way for the U.S. Supreme Court to say, you 4 states, or you cheated, or you didn't. We don't even have to reach the fraud. You didn't follow your own constitutional requirements. You didn't allow the legislature to decide how the election would occur. You can have no excuse balloting. That's not in your state constitution. Your legislature did not approve wide scale, no excuse balloting. You can't keep the polls open for 6 more days or 3 more days. That's also not in your state constitution, and your legislature didn't decide that. The legislative power the U.S. Constitution gives, guys, is plenary, meaning it's total and belongs only to a state legislature.
Well, that's the perfect answer. I just put up, let me post it up there again. Ed Burchett put up a comment, and Ed, you can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I think Ed definitely leans a little more left than the 3 of us do. But his quote is, the most ridiculous lawsuit of all time. If all 4 states were nullified, Biden would still win. But that's not factoring in the fact that it goes back to the legislatures. Is that what you're saying, Royal?
That's right. And Edward, I would just say, no matter who you support for president, if we don't have an honest election system nationwide, I promise you the next thing that's going to happen in this country is the shooting. In other words, if people think that their most powerful voice, the strongest tool they have to help dictate the kind of country they want to live in, has now been perverted, weakened, undermined, or destroyed, their right to vote, we're never going to have another honest election in this country. Because 4 years from now, it'll just be which party can cheat the best. Well, I hate to say it like that. So
you're right, but let me so Ed just put this comment, prove it in court. Well, Ed, I just got to say, full disclosure, I only pretend like I'm a lawyer on Facebook, but that's exactly what we're doing. Hence the supreme second word, court. And if they decide to hear it and take up the case, fine. If they don't, then they won't. But I think, Royal, this is bigger than whether Trump ends up being elected or not. I agree with you. It's way bigger than that. It's about having confidence in the elections process. I mean, we saw, the Florida ordeal back in 2000, and now fast forward to this. Those two things put together have really weakened a lot of people's confidence in the entire system. And maybe you can touch on this too. So we have a very disparate election system among the states, and I'm all for states' rights, but I hate to say it, maybe after some of these election snafus, maybe we do need to have a more singular elections process inside of the states. What's your opinion on that?
I think however we do it, and I'm like you guys, I think the federal government is already way too big and too involved in American life. But this is something with modern technology that we shouldn't get wrong.
Right.
I mean, we can see what's going on the moon, and yet we can't count votes, honestly. So I have believed since back in June when we said, states started saying we're going to have no excuse balloting. But you don't even have to reach the fraud to just say, your legislature, as state constitution, doesn't allow no excuse balloting. It doesn't allow 3 extra days after November 3rd at 8 o'clock to receive votes. It doesn't allow votes that aren't postmarked and witnessed and signed to be accepted. You have to keep the envelopes, Pennsylvania. That's required in your constitution. You didn't keep any of the envelopes. You can't even credit most of the stuff. So that's all constitutionally based. We don't even have to reach the fraud for the Supreme Court to say, you all haven't followed your own legislatures, your own state constitutional law. You've dumped a pile of mess onto us. So we're saying or they could revote it. I think that's much harder. I think it's easier to say, it's too late. We can't fix it. We're not counting your 4 states. That puts Biden close to 270, and it's going into the House of Representatives.
Yeah, which is the actual process, if that's the way that it plays out, correct? And that's laid out, now correct me if I'm wrong, that's laid out in the Constitution, correct?
It is. It's commonly called the contingent election, but yes, laid out clearly in the Constitution.
Duke, did you have a question or comment? I may have kind of interrupted you.
Yeah, well, Royal was talking about, the verification of signatures on ballots and, the technology. We should be able to figure this out, and I totally agree with that. But we've had charges that in these states that, signatures were or were not verified and you didn't have validation, in which, I think we're getting into a Republican versus Democrat argument there. Democrats don't want validation. Republicans do want validation. And so when you have states that weaken the argument for validation, I mean, I think you have where we're at here now. And I say that to go to the point that, which is the prevailing idea, because either way, as divisive as politics is and the country is, we're basically 50-50. Just today, I saw a new page created on Facebook Texas, the secession of Texas or what have you. So let's say, for instance, that the Supreme Court didn't rule favorably to our side of the fence, which, we all lean conservative. Where does our side go? Then if it goes our way, the other side, I mean, where do they go, or how does that go? A lot of folks have a question in their mind is, where does the country end up after the dust settles when the Supreme Court rules?
If the Supreme Court took this matter up, I don't know how they could rule in a principled way based upon the Constitution and their own precedent and allow this to stand. But to answer your question, I'd like to say it's a simple and easy answer, but it's not. The way the people who supported President Trump feel, they're going to say, oh, you peace and unity now. But you never gave this man a moment of peace, a chance from the moment he came down the escalator with his beautiful wife to announce he was going to run for president. You never have given him a chance. Now you want peace and unity? Hell no.
Yeah, it's kind of a what's good for the goose is good for the gander, both legally, politically, and, everything else included. Here's what I would also suggest, to folks like Ed and all that that are obviously, a little more left-leaning certainly than we are, is remember that if the Supreme Court does go ahead and take the case up and they rule on it whichever way, that sets the precedent in the future when the roles may be reversed. So it goes both ways, in my opinion.
It does. We either have free and fair elections in this country, and let me just say, there'll never be a perfect election. Right. But we're not even talking about one state that screwed up terribly, like Florida 20 years ago. We're talking about a systemic problem, a problem across the board, one that looks to me quite well choreographed, quite well organized. And that's what in the law we call that mens rea. You have criminal intent. You have intent for months ahead of time to figure out a way that your candidate can't possibly use. But we've seen too many examples. We've all lived long enough to know when in life things make sense and when they just do not make sense. And I think any reasonable person, and hopefully there's some left in America, will say, it's impossible that this many things went wrong, coincidentally.
Yep.
Royal, I'll ask you one more question, and I guess, Rex, we'll work towards closing this out. Royal, what would you say to the layperson, like myself, that, there's been countless lawsuits across the country in a lot of these different states and their counties, and what would you say to the person that said they no longer have faith in the judicial system? I know that may put you kind of in a spot because you are an attorney, but I know you to be an upstanding, honorable guy, and I know you even ran for attorney general one time. I think you would have been a fine one. But what would you say to people that have lost faith maybe in the judiciary?
I would say two things. One, I pray a lot, and I think we should all be praying. I think this country, if you look at what the framers did, if you look at the fact that George Washington with his rag army should never have been able to defeat the British, our country, those framers should never have been able to pull the big states and the small states together. I think all of this has had God's hand on it, and so we need to keep praying. The second thing is that we can be the greatest resistance to wrong that we've ever been before. We can demand, we can go back to the grassroots of our rights, especially states' rights, the 10th Amendment, and speak out and be more vocal than we have ever had before. Keep in mind, and I hope we are not at this point, but our country, at the time of the Revolution, the American Revolution, People fought and died. Many people did coming up through the Civil War. It has caused bloodshed for this country to stay together. Whatever it takes. In the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson makes clear, when the government no longer serves those purposes that we all know them to be life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, freedom, personal freedom. When government no longer serves those purposes, it is fair to alter or to abolish it. I hope we're not there, but I never give up on America because of prayer and because of the resilience of the American people.
Amen.
You got that right.
All right. Well, do we want to go ahead and wrap up this part of the show, Duke?
I think so. I mean, Royal, you hit it out of the park as usual. There's nobody I know better that's more eloquent in explaining the Constitution and I guess you could say where we stand as a country. I appreciate you coming on, and hopefully we filled in some blanks for some folks out there.
Absolutely.
Well, God, I so enjoyed it, and please, if there's ever an opportunity in the future, I would love to come back.
Hey, I've thoroughly enjoyed it too, Royal. Keep posting and keep blogging and keep up the good fight.
Thanks, Royal.
Do it, guys. I'll do it.
Thank you, Royal. All right. Okay, so I'm officially knocking Royal out of the green room. It's just you and I now.
Well, that was enlightening. Royal is eloquent as usual. I loved his take on it. He basically spelled out where we are, and I guess we're just everyone waiting on pins and needles for the Supreme Court. I think, well, at least for 50% of the population, it will give some hope that our judicial system is maybe working right.
Well, true, and I'd just like to reiterate before we close out that the folks that are obviously more left-leaning than Duke and I are, in politics, or voted for Biden, supported Biden, whatever the case is, remember, to me, this Supreme Court decision or potential decision or taking up this case has far bigger consequences because, again, in 4 years, the situation might be reversed. And sometimes we tend to forget that. To me, this case is not really just a Republican-Democrat thing at all. It's how the elections are being conducted or not, and keeping as much fairness in the game as we can. So,
No one should have a problem with the validation of votes. It
right.
should be my vote should be equal to your vote, and your vote should be equal to my vote.
That is true, and I'll close out with this. Terry Norris just said, thank y'all. Not everyone understands how the Constitution works. The law is the law, no matter what side you're on. Let's close it out with that. See you later, Duke.
Good night.
Good night.